The shrill beep of the smoke detector jolted me awake. I bolted out of bed and ran to Lucas's room, heart pounding. Thick plumes of smoke billowed out from under his door. I barged in, waves of heat hitting me. Lucas was sitting up in bed, crying and coughing as acrid fumes filled the room. "Lucas, are you okay?" I yelled over the piercing alarm. He reached for me, tears streaming down his soot-smudged cheeks. Scooping him into my arms, I dashed out of the room. Jonah lounged in the hallway, an empty popcorn bag and can of butane at his feet. He watched us with amusement as I frantically patted Lucas's back, trying to soothe his hacking coughs. "What did you do?" I demanded, glaring at my 17-year-old stepson. Lucas wailed, burying his face in my shoulder. Jonah smirked. "Chill out, it was just a prank with some smoke bombs. The kid needs to toughen up." Fury boiled inside me. "He's 6 years old. You could have seriously hurt him." "Eek," Jonah snickered. "Don't be so dramatic. It was a harmless joke." He whipped out his phone and started recording us. I wanted to slap that smug look off his face, but Lucas was trembling in my arms, his safety my priority. I carried him outside into the cool night air, rubbing his back gently. "It's okay, baby. Just breathe," I soothed. After a few gulping breaths, his cries tapered to whimpers, but he still clung to me like a lifeline. My blood boiled. This was the last straw. Ever since I married Theo 3 years ago, gaining an insolent teenage stepson in the process, Jonah's pranks had grown increasingly menacing. Lucas was his favorite target. Just last week, I'd found Lucas's favorite stuffed animal, gutted and hung from the ceiling fan, the mutilated fluff strewn across his bedroom. Jonah had dismissed it as childhood fun and games when I confronted him. Theo always excused Jonah's behavior, calling me oversensitive. "Boys will be boys," he'd say with an indifferent shrug. But this felt different, crueler. Jonah sidled up, phone extended as he recorded us. "Oh, is little Lucas scared?" he taunted. Lucas whimpered and hid his face. I tightened my arms around him. "Get away from us," I snapped at Jonah. "Haven't you tormented him enough?" Jonah's lip curled. "I was just messing around." God, learn to take a joke. My hands shook with anger. I wanted to knock that phone out of his hand and wipe that smug look off his face. But Lucas needed me. I carried him inside, throwing a vicious glare at Jonah. "We're not finished here." After settling a sniffling Lucas in my bed and checking for any signs of smoke inhalation, I stormed back outside. Jonah lounged against the porch railing, chuckling over his phone, probably already posting the video online to further humiliate Lucas. "Just what the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted. He glanced up with a casual sneer. "It was a prank. Don't get your panties in a twist." "A prank? You terrified a 6-year-old boy, filled his room with smoke." Jonah rolled his eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. Can't you take a joke?" I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. "This isn't funny. Your bullying has to stop. Do you hear me?" He let out an exaggerated yawn. "Don't tell me how to live my life. You're not my mother. As long as you're under my roof, you'll show Lucas respect." I held his challenging stare. "If this continues, there will be consequences." Jonah's lip curled in a derisive sneer. "Ooh, I'm so scared. What are you going to do? Ground me?" He laughed mockingly. Fury boiled inside me, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I turned on my heel and went back inside to comfort Lucas, knowing this was far from over. Jonah's cruelty demanded retribution. If Theo refused to discipline his son, then I would handle this my way. The next morning, I recounted the smoke bomb incident to Theo over breakfast. He sat sipping his coffee, shrugging indifferently, as I described Jonah's malicious prank. "Boys will be boys," he said dismissively. I'm sure Jonah didn't mean any real harm. He just wanted to have some fun. I stared at him in disbelief. "Fun? He terrified a 6-year-old, filled his room with smoke." Theo waved his hand. "You're overreacting. Lucas needs to toughen up." My anger surged. I pointed an accusing finger at him. "This is your son we're talking about. Aren't you going to discipline him?" Theo's eyes flashed with annoyance. "Don't tell me how to parent my own kid. If I talked to you that way about Lucas, you'd have my head." I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my frustration. Ever since I married Theo, he'd undermined my authority with Jonah, encouraging his son's insolence. Things were only getting worse. "Lucas won't sleep in his own room now," I said evenly. "He's terrified Jonah will hurt him again. As his father, you need to take action here." Theo drained his coffee and stood up. "I'm late for work. We'll talk about this later." He pecked my cheek and headed out the door, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to scream. Lucas was suffering while Theo stuck his head in the sand. He always made excuses for Jonah's behavior, but this had gone too far. After dropping Lucas at school, I called my friend Alicia. I confided my concerns about Jonah escalating his bullying. "That sounds serious," she said. "Can Theo set some boundaries?" I sighed. "Theo refuses to discipline him. He undermines me whenever I try to curb Jonah's behavior." "Yikes, that's a red flag," Alicia said. "Have you considered family counseling?" The suggestion rankled me. Why should Lucas be subjected to therapy because of Jonah's cruelty? As his mother, it was my job to protect him. If Theo wouldn't act, I needed to take matters into my own hands. A seed of an idea began to form. Theo's lackadaisical parenting had enabled Jonah's reprehensible behavior for too long. It was time for me to push back, to finally hold both of them accountable. When Lucas came home, he seemed shaken. With some gentle prodding, he confessed that Jonah had cornered him at recess, whispering chilling threats about their next prank. My blood boiled. This had to stop. That night after Lucas was asleep, I confronted Theo again. "We need to send Jonah to counseling, set firm boundaries." He threatened Lucas again today. Theo didn't even glance up from his computer. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Lay off the kid." I slammed my hands on the desk. "Why are you ignoring this? He's tormenting Lucas." Theo's glare chilled me. "I won't tell you again. Back off." The finality of his words stunned me. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over. Theo would always put Jonah first, no matter what cruelty he inflicted. Fine, I thought. If Theo refused to protect Lucas, then I would. It was time to take matters into my own hands. No more pleading or idle threats. If I wanted to put an end to Jonah's bullying for good, I needed to outmaneuver them both. I lay awake planning that night, cold purpose flowing through me. I would beat Theo and Jonah at their own game. Justice would be served. The sound of shouting jolted me from my thoughts. I was volunteering in Lucas's classroom when raised voices echoed from down the hall. Exchanging puzzled glances with the teacher, I stepped out to investigate. At the end of the corridor, a crowd had gathered. Drawing closer, I realized the commotion was coming from the principal's office. "Absolutely unacceptable behavior," an irate father bellowed. Principal Collins tried placating the man, but he angrily brushed her off. "My son's got a black eye thanks to that punk." My breath caught. It didn't take a genius to know who the father was referring to. Sure enough, a sullen Jonah slouched in one of the office chairs, glaring defiantly as the man continued shouting. Principal Collins noticed me lingering in the doorway. "Arya, perhaps you could provide some insight into this unfortunate incident," she said delicately. I averted my gaze from Jonah's defiant stare. "I'm afraid I don't know what this is regarding." The irate father whirled on me. "That hooligan of yours attacked my boy in the parking lot this morning, punched him right in the face." I felt Jonah's glare boring into me. Keeping my expression neutral, I turned to Principal Collins. "I'm very sorry this happened, but I don't see what this has to do with me." The man's face reddened. "Don't play dumb. You need to keep that punk on a tighter leash." He jabbed an accusatory finger towards Jonah. Maintaining my composure, I firmly stated this was an issue between the two boys. I avoided meeting Jonah's stare, refusing to be manipulated by him anymore. After diffusing the situation, I returned to Lucas's classroom. But inwardly, my mind raced. Clearly, Jonah's bullying had not only escalated, but gone public. I needed to take action before Lucas became his next victim at school. That afternoon, I confronted Theo, urging us to present a united front on discipline. But true to form, he refused to even discuss the incident at school today. "It's none of our business," he said indifferently. "Let the principal handle it." I gaped at him. "Jonah assaulted another child. We need to intervene before this escalates." Theo turned on me, eyes blazing. "You always undermine my parenting, overstepping your bounds with my son." He jabbed his finger at me. "Jonah is my responsibility, not yours." His words cut me deeply. I fought to keep my voice steady. Lucas's safety is my priority. If Jonah is bullying others, it's only a matter of time before he targets Lucas again. Theo crossed his arms. "You're being paranoid. Lucas needs to toughen up and handle things himself." I stared at him in disbelief. He's 6 years old. Jonah is practically an adult. Why are we subjecting a little boy to his abuse? "That's enough," Theo shouted. I won't have you question my parenting anymore. Stay out of matters with Jonah." He stormed off, leaving me shaking with frustration. Once again, Theo refused to acknowledge the severity of Jonah's behavior. He was delusional, blinded by his loyalty to a son who refused any accountability. Meanwhile, Lucas was suffering, his innocence being chipped away by Jonah's malicious actions. If Theo wouldn't protect Lucas, then the duty fell to me. After today's confrontation at school, it was clear this dysfunction couldn't be fixed from within our broken home. I needed to look for justice elsewhere. I awoke to muffled sobs coming from Lucas's room. Heart-clenching, I rushed down the hall to check on him. I found Lucas curled up on the floor, hugging his knees as he cried. Shredded paper was strewn all around him, the remnants of his beloved comic book collection. "Lucas, what happened?" I asked gently, sitting down and pulling him into my lap. He buried his face in my shoulder. "Jonah came in and ripped up all my comic books," he whimpered. I stiffened, stroking his hair as I surveyed the destruction. Jonah had decimated Lucas's prized possession, leaving the colorful scraps littered across the carpet. There, it'll be okay," I soothed, while rage burned inside me. This had Jonah's cruelty written all over it. Just then, Jonah's mocking voice sounded from the doorway. "Ah, is baby Luca crying over his stupid comics?" Lucas shrank back against me. I glowered at Jonah, instinctively tightening my protective hold. "That's enough, just leave us alone." Jonah smirked, leaning against the doorframe. "Those kitty comics were dumb anyway. Luca needs to grow up." Blood pounded in my ears. "You had no right to destroy his belongings. Get out!" "Make me," Jonah sneered. "Don't tell me how to live my life." I trembled with rage. This insolent punk had the audacity to torment Lucas right under our roof. I wanted to slap that smug look off his face. Jonah laughed coldly. "God, you two need to lighten up. They're just stupid comics." He sauntered away, whistling mockingly. My fists clenched. I had to get Lucas away from here, somewhere Jonah couldn't terrorize him. Over the next week, Jonah's bullying escalated. Menacing texts, destroyed toys, callous verbal abuse. Lucas was subjected to it all. My heart broke watching my sweet little boy become more withdrawn and fearful. Meanwhile, Theo continued making pathetic excuses. "It's just normal sibling rivalry," he claimed. "Lucas needs to toughen up." But the final straw came late one night when I discovered Lucas's beloved goldfish, Bubble, belly up in his tank. Scrawled on the tank in red marker were the words, "Snitches get stitches." It didn't take a genius to deduce the culprit behind this vicious threat. I'd had enough. Theo refused to protect Lucas, so it was up to me to take matters into my own hands. The next day I withdrew a large sum of cash from my personal savings account, money Theo knew nothing about. For weeks now, I'd been compiling evidence documenting Jonah's reprehensible behavior and Theo's enabling complicity. I tucked the cash safely away, finalizing my plans. That night, I confronted Theo one last time, pleading for us to present a united front with discipline. He reacted with his usual indifference laced with disdain for my parenting concerns. "I won't tell you again," he warned. "Let me handle my own son." He stormed off, leaving me with icy resolve. Fine, I thought. I'll handle this my way. Lucas had suffered long enough while Theo stuck his head in the sand. His loyalty would always lie with his bully of a son. Well, not anymore. I was done being gaslighted and undermined. Lucas's innocence was being stripped away by the day under this toxic roof. If Theo refused to act, I would. It was time for me to take back control and finally put an end to this dysfunctional household. No more playing nice or following the rules. Justice would be served, one way or another. Over the next few weeks, I discreetly gathered evidence of Jonah's bullying and Theo's enabling behavior. I compiled a dossier of photos documenting Jonah vandalizing Lucas's belongings, screenshots of threatening texts, and even audio recordings of their vicious verbal abuse. I also started tracking Theo's movements, keeping a detailed log of his activities. He claimed to be working late most nights, but I suspected another motivation. My suspicions were confirmed when I followed him one evening to a seedy casino. So while our savings dwindled from Jonah's expensive gadgets and clothing, Theo was pissing away money gambling. Armed with concrete proof of their deception, it was time to put my plan into action. I withdrew the last of my personal savings I'd been hiding from Theo, gathering essential documents and retaining a lawyer on the down low. When the day came, I wanted to be ready for a clean exit with Lucas in tow. But I needed a catalyst first, something to publicly expose both Theo and Jonah's deceit in an irrefutable display. The time had come for consequences. The perfect opportunity arose a few weeks later at Thanksgiving. Both our families would be gathering for the holiday meal, the ideal audience for what I had in mind. I made sure Lucas stayed by my side the entire afternoon, protecting him from Jonah's torments. Right on cue, as dinner concluded, Jonah made a snide comment about Lucas wetting the bed the other night. Lucas's lip trembled at the callous humiliation in front of our whole family. It was time for the curtain to drop on this charade. I plugged my phone into the TV and began playing the video I'd compiled documenting Jonah's relentless bullying. "What is this?" Theo demanded, reaching for the remote. I smacked his hand away, increasing the volume. "This is the truth." For 10 excruciating minutes, our families witnessed Jonah's despicable behavior via the photos, videos, and screenshots I'd collected. By the end, tears were streaming down Lucas's face. Theo looked on in shock, rendered speechless. When the video ended, I calmly ejected my phone and slipped it into my pocket. Stony silence engulfed the room. You could hear a pin drop. Theo found his voice first. "How could you ambush us like this?" His face reddened with embarrassment and fury. I met his gaze coolly. "Don't blame me for exposing the dysfunction you've enabled under your roof." Murmurs arose from our gathered family. Lucas clutched my hand tightly. I gave a gentle, reassuring squeeze before turning my glare on Jonah. He pointed an accusing finger at me, sneering, "You psycho bitch!" Gasps erupted from around the table. Lucas buried his face in my shoulder. I maintained icy composure. "This charade ends today. I'm filing for divorce and sole custody." Theo shot to his feet. "Over my dead body, Jonah is my son!" "Perfect." I reached into my handbag and retrieved the manila envelope containing my evidence of Theo's gambling addiction and reckless spending. "Not when the court sees how you've endangered Lucas by enabling your son's violence," I said. More murmurs broke out as I revealed Theo's gambling habits and discretionary spending. My in-laws regarded me with dawning respect. Theo glared at me with impotent rage. "You deceitful snake! How dare you humiliate me like this?" I slammed my hands on the table, rattling the dishes. "How dare you subject Lucas to abuse while you secretly gamble away our money?" The room exploded into chaos, both families shouting. Lucas clung to me, trembling. In the pandemonium, I quietly slipped away with my son in tow, ready to start a new life far from this toxic household. Justice had been served. I finally reclaimed control after years of manipulation from Theo and Jonah. By exposing their deceit, I secured freedom and safety for myself and my son. The time had come for a new beginning. In the weeks following Thanksgiving, my life changed drastically. I filed for divorce from Theo and obtained a restraining order against Jonah. After years under their toxic roof, Lucas and I moved across the country to start fresh. It felt liberating finally breaking free from that dysfunction. But the fight wasn't over yet. I still had a custody battle looming against Theo, and knowing him, he wouldn't let go of Lucas without a war. Sure enough, Theo sent threatening emails declaring he'd fight me to the grave for custody. I braced myself for a bitter clash in family court. This time, I had right on my side. The day of our hearing arrived. Dressed in my best suit, I held Lucas's hand tightly as we entered the imposing courtroom. Theo sat at the front table wearing an arrogant smirk that made my blood boil. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Collins," called the bailiff. I squeezed Lucas's hand gently as we stood. Today, justice would finally prevail. Judge Collins peered over her spectacles. "This hearing is to resolve the matter of custody for minor child Lucas Walker, as well as the division of assets between Arya and Theodore Walker. Are both sides ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," I spoke clearly. Theo nodded, glaring daggers at me. For the next few hours, we presented evidence and testimony supporting our respective sides. I recounted numerous incidents detailing the abuse and endangerment Lucas suffered under Theo's roof, providing recordings and statements as proof. In contrast, Theo's case relied solely on arrogant entitlement, insisting blood relation alone made him most fit as a father. He cut an increasingly flustered figure, bravado melting under the onslaught of facts I presented exposing his parental negligence. Finally, Judge Collins held up a hand for silence. "I believe I've heard sufficient testimony to reach a decision." She peered over her glasses at Theo and I. In the matter of Lucas Walker, full legal and physical custody is hereby granted to Arya Walker. Elation surged through me. Yes, I cried out, while Theo shouted in protest. The judge's gavel silenced him. Furthermore, I am granting Arya Walker's request for child support from Theodore Walker in the amount of $1,200 monthly until Lucas turns 18. Theo's face turned an ugly purple shade. This is outrageous. You can't do this to me. Judge Collins stared him down. You subjected an innocent child to abuse by enabling a violent environment. Consider yourself lucky you aren't also facing criminal charges. Theo pointed a trembling finger at me. You'll pay for this, I swear. The bailiff stepped forward. Sir, that sounded like a threat. I must ask you to take your seat. Sinking back down, Theo buried his face in his hands. I maintained a dignified composure, determined not to sink to his level. I had taken the high road every step, presenting only facts and maintaining grace under pressure. In the end, justice spoke for itself. As Theo was escorted from the courtroom, Judge Collins gave me an approving nod. I scooped Lucas into my arms, showering his face with kisses. We had triumphed over deceit and abuse, securing a peaceful life for ourselves far from toxic influences. Good had prevailed. In the following days, I savored sweet victory. Reports came in of Theo sinking further into debt now that I had cut him off from my savings. Meanwhile, Jonah had been arrested for assaulting a classmate and was now facing criminal charges plus mandatory therapy. His reign of terror had finally ended. Lucas displayed resilience, bouncing back now that he was safe from harm. I enrolled him in a wonderful new school where he made friends and even joined an arts program. Each day the shadows of his past faded a little more. As for me, I relished this fresh start. The righteous satisfaction of exposing Theo and Jonah's cruelty, combined with securing Lucas in a loving home, gave me a sense of profound purpose. For the first time in years, I truly breathed free, the drama and chaos now behind me. Justice had been hard-won, but sweet. Lucas and I now walked in the light, the future stretching bright before us. In the months following the custody hearing, I received sporadic, threatening messages from Theo. He blamed me for destroying his life and swore I'd pay. I simply archived the messages in case they could be used as future evidence. Meanwhile, Theo's circumstances grew increasingly dire. His gambling spiraled out of control, racking up monumental debts. With no access to my savings anymore, he resorted to increasingly desperate measures. The day I received a call from his mother, I knew the reckoning had arrived. Arya, dear, I'm sorry to bother you, Evelyn began, sounding strained. But I'm afraid Theo's gotten himself into serious trouble. According to her, Theo had not only lost his job and declared bankruptcy, but had also resorted to theft from close family and friends to pay off furious bookies. His own parents had just filed a police report upon discovering $15,000 in heirloom jewelry missing from their home. My mind raced, wondering if any of my valuables had also been pilfered. As far as I knew, Theo had no idea where I'd moved to with Lucas. Still, unease crept down my spine. That night, I double-checked our door locks and windows. Lucas and I had created a peaceful sanctuary since escaping Theo's toxicity. I refused to let his desperate crimes disturb our new life. Sure enough, a week later, Evelyn called again, sobbing this time. Theo had robbed his own parents' home in broad daylight. While they were out grocery shopping, a neighbor spotted him racing down the street with bags of valuables. It was brazen, foolish desperation. The police soon caught up to him trying to hawk their stolen items at a pawn shop. I felt sick as Evelyn recounted how he'd screamed vicious obscenities at the officers, even spitting at them as they dragged him away in handcuffs. The Theo I'd known had descended fully into bitter madness, lashing out at the world as he faced the consequences of his cruelty. Some dark part of me whispered that he deserved this reckoning. But mostly I felt a profound sadness for the man he could have been, if not for the blackness in his heart. At Lucas's request, I arranged a supervised visit with Evelyn so she could see her grandson. They wept in each other's arms, two innocent souls scarred by Theo's degeneracy. It solidified my decision to move on fully, leaving Theo's darkness firmly in the past. A few months later, the final hammer fell. A short article in the local newspaper reported that former hedge fund manager Theodore Walker had pled guilty to charges ranging from theft to domestic abuse. He'd be serving a minimum 5-year prison sentence. I let out a shaky breath, the last cord tying me to Theo finally severed. He could no longer hurt us. "Mommy, are you okay?" Lucas asked, glancing up from his coloring book. I hugged him tightly. "Yes, baby, I'm more than okay." I smiled down at my sweet, resilient boy, who had weathered so much yet retained his shining spirit. We never heard from Theo again. I focused on giving Lucas the happiest, most secure childhood possible. Every day, we healed a little more. Years later, as I proudly watched Lucas graduate high school as valedictorian, I reflected on our journey. We had escaped toxicity and created a loving family from the ashes. The darkness did not win. In the end, love prevailed. Our scars made us stronger and brought us closer together. And though the road was long, we healed by walking it hand in hand. Lucas was, and always would be, my guiding light. The day I watched Lucas walk across the stage to accept his high school diploma, my heart swelled with pride. My sweet boy had blossomed into an intelligent, kind young man despite the cruelty he once endured. Seeing him grin as he clutched that hard-earned diploma stirred a profound mix of emotions: happiness, relief, satisfaction, and most powerfully, vindication. We did it, I thought. We survived the toxic storm and came out wiser on the other side. After Lucas's graduation ceremony, we went out to dinner with Evelyn to celebrate. She squeezed his hand, blinking back proud tears. "You did so well, Lucas. I know your parents are smiling down on you tonight." I swallowed the lump in my throat. She meant Theo too, of course. Evelyn had long forgiven her son's cruelty, but some wounds do not fully heal. After dinner, Lucas decided to head out with friends while Evelyn and I returned home. Settling on the porch swing with a glass of wine, I asked her delicately, "Have you heard anything about Theo lately?" She stared down at her lap. "He'll be eligible for parole in a year. I pray he's found some peace of mind after all this time." I hoped so too for her sake. People could change, but redemption required facing the past, something Theo had spent a lifetime avoiding. My phone buzzed and I glanced down. A text from Alicia read, "Did you hear? Jonah got arrested again." I quickly replied, "What happened?" Her response, "Caught vandalizing his high school gym." Third strike after all those bullying incidents years ago. I exhaled slowly. So his cruelty continued. "Jonah's been arrested again," I told Evelyn gently. She just nodded, unsurprised. Despite my bitter history with Theo and Jonah, I took no pleasure in their pain. But there were consequences to cruelty, a lesson I hoped they had finally learned. The bright spot was Lucas. Sheltered in a peaceful home, he grew into a thoughtful, intelligent man. The nightmares that once plagued him faded along with memories of his troubled childhood. Watching him thrive filled me with fierce pride. I had fought through hell to secure a loving, stable life for my son. The scars remained but shaped us with empathy and wisdom. Some nights, bittersweet nostalgia still washed over me. I would always mourn the happy family we could have been. But life was a winding road. The old saying proved true: when God closes a door, he opens a window. Though Theo rejected the light, Lucas and I walked in it proudly. By taking the high road, we broke the cycle of cruelty without sacrificing our humanity. After surviving the storm, we embraced a new dawn. The day Lucas left for college, we clung to each other weeping. "I'm so proud of you," I choked out. "Your strength inspires me every day." He squeezed me tight. "I owe it all to my hero mom. You gave me my life back." Watching him drive away to start his own life chapter, my heart swelled with love and hope. The past was behind us now. A bright future lay ahead for Lucas, one he could shape with his compassion and integrity. The years flew by in a blur. Lucas thrived in college and beyond, forging his own path. He married a lovely woman who treated him with the kindness he deserved. When they had a son of their own, Lucas vowed to give his child the happy, peaceful childhood he had missed, but always deserved. The cycle of cruelty, dysfunction, and lies ended with our family. By taking the high road, we found healing. From the ashes, goodness grew. And so the story comes full circle. My son, once tormented, now has fulfilled his destiny as a loving father. And I, having overcome darkness, can rest knowing I walk in the light. Our scars healed because we faced them together. Love prevails.